I'm delighted that Sarah Bryan will be talking to us. And Sarah is not just a program officer at Granted, but she is faculty rotator. And as a rotator, she gets to bring all of these experiences at the end of her rotation back to her institution. So, Dr. Bryan, kick it off.
Hi, thank you so much. I am just delighted to be here with you today. Apologize, my lighting is kind of dim, so I'll be sharing my screen a lot, so hopefully that won't matter. I will say when I think of NSF research, I think of things like telescopes and cosmology and polar research and ecosystem research. I mean, there is just the breadth of research that happens at NSF is just so wide. You know, not so much biomedical because that's NIH territory, but pretty much everything else. It really is a fun place to be. So, okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Right, and still have you. Okay, so I am so happy to be here. I so wish we were in person. I'm going to do my very best to give this presentation virtually and try to be as interactive as possible because this is a rather long session for you to just sit and listen to a screen. To start, I'm Sarah O'Brien. I'm a program director at Granted, as was introduced. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, what it's like to be a program director, but I'm going to talk about a lot about the research enterprise, the Granted program, and then kind of how to face your fears and get funded. So I'm going to give some of my very best advice and tips about writing competitive proposals. When I was asked to give this presentation, there's a lot of change at NSF and a lot of change with our program. We're not sure what the next year is going to bring with the federal budget and so on. And so I kind of thought about, okay, well, what can I bring that's unique to this group of people? And I've been in research development for 10 years, and now I'm at NSF. And so I feel like I can bring you a lot of information about the context in which you do research that you might not be thinking about, and a little bit about NSF. So, okay, so I'm going to start. I was asked to talk about my career path a little bit, so I'm going to start with that, and then we're going to get into the research enterprise. Talk a little bit about Granted, and then tell you some advice for developing, competitive proposals. I have some polls built in, so I'm wondering, David, could you do poll number 1? Am I able to do it? Well, you were muted.
I have it up, so I will launch it right now.
Okay, great. So this poll is for me to hear a little bit about you. I can't see anyone, so I'm interested to know who all is here and what experience you might be coming with. And that might give me a sense of some sections of this I could go through a little quicker or spend a little more time on.
It's looking like early career faculty is the majority of our attendance.
Okay.
And early career grant administrator. We have some senior faculty, mid-career. So it's early and mid predominantly.
Okay. All right, that's great. That's kind of what I've targeted. So we'll be on the right track then. Okay, so I myself am mid-career. I am a scientist by training. So I have a bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science, and I had a minor in professional writing. I really love writing. Eventually, I got a PhD in ecosystem ecology from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and then I did a postdoc at Argonne National Laboratory in microbial ecology. From there, I became a staff scientist at Argonne, which is sort of a faculty equivalent kind of role. And actually I did my PhD research and my postdoc at Argonne as well. So I was at Argonne for like 15 years, which is a Department of Energy research lab. My main interest was terrestrial ecology, specifically the below ground components of terrestrial ecology, so soil. And I wanted to understand the soil carbon cycle. So I was interested in understanding soil organic matter and how that fits into the global carbon cycle and the relationship to climate change. So this was a Department of Energy research lab, and so I was interested in Department of Energy questions. So on this slide, you can see the center here, I have soil. That was my main interest. But to study soil, I was doing lots of biogeochemistry. I used some carbon dating techniques. Towards the end, was doing really advanced imaging work. I was cultivating bacteria, sequencing DNA of single bacteria, and also microbial communities extracted from the soil. I was using quantum dots, which are a nanoparticle. I was marginally involved in some plant genetics work, and then all of that was feeding into climate models. So really interdisciplinary. And here, and I dug up one of those old photo mosaics from like 20 years ago to represent that all these different really detailed kinds of things were helping me develop a bigger picture understanding of things. And that is really my, my strong suit, is kind of integrating up to see bigger pictures. So I kind of consider this sort of a systems mindset. And it also meant that I worked with a lot of collaborators. All these different people, like I'm not an X-ray physicist. I don't do bioinformatics. So I had to be able to interact with all these different kinds of people in order to do my research. So I became very good at knowing how to interact with others, people with different science backgrounds, and help us reach a common goal. And it also meant that between this sort of systems thinking and bigger picture, and then all this exposure to people in other disciplines, I was always sort of the person who naturally kind of would identify potential relationships or collaborations. It's like, oh, did you see this funding opportunity? You and you and you could work together on this, even if it wasn't my research, even if there was no role for me. And that really set me up for the next phase of my career. Okay, so I was at Argonne doing science, and at some point, a few years into my staff scientist role there, the funding situation really took a left turn and was not really ideal for the kinds of things I was doing. And so I needed to figure something else out. It was very disruptive, and I needed to figure out what else could I do? And the only thing I had ever trained for was doing bench work and field work and thinking about soil. So what transferable skills did I have that I could use for something else? And I stumbled onto research development by interacting in a workshop hosted by the research development team at the University of Chicago. University of Chicago operates Argonne, so that's kind of how I got involved in that. And it turned out they had an opening, and I was able to join this team at the University of Chicago in their central research office. They did really cool work. They worked on large proposals, helping develop those proposals and project manage things and stuff. And then they also did a lot of sort of ideation and team development, idea development. You know, we did things like speed networking between social scientists and data scientists, and really neat things like that. But then a position opened, and I really wanted to move back there. So, let's see, 8 years ago, I moved back to UIC, and was eventually promoted to Director of Research Development. A year ago, I started at NSF as a rotational program director, or rotator. This is under the Intergovernmental Personnel Act, so sometimes we're called IPAs. So this is a temporary position. It'll last from 1 to 4 years. I'm still employed by the University of Illinois, Chicago, but I am on detail to the NSF, so all of my work is for NSF. So I do program director work for this program called Granted that I'm going to talk a lot more about. So that entails finding reviewers, running merit review panels, managing our award portfolio, and then engaging the community through things like this and other types of conferences and so on. So NSF has used this rotator role to help keep fresh expertise coming in. So it's not just a bunch of career bureaucrats who are making all the funding decisions for all this research, but you have people coming in from the community who are fresh off the ground, and then they go back to their home institution and they bring all that experience that they gained from NSF back to their home institution. So it's really great. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really good experience and a nice way to function. Like everything, NSF is uncertain, all of the organizational structure. So we'll see what this looks like in the future. Okay, so what to expect today? The organizers, when they invited me, were pretty open about what I could talk about, and so I am taking advantage of that. I'm going to talk a fair bit just about research development, because that is the expertise that I bring, and then some NSF insight. And some of the research development that I can do or share will come with this NSF infusion. Some of this is going to be my own personal observations or my opinions, and I'll try to make a point to say when that's the case. There's going to be very limited discussion of agency-wide change at NSF, and that is partly because some of that I do know about, I'm not allowed to talk about. Mostly, though, it is because it's all still to be determined. You read all the same news that I read and see all the same budget drafts that I see. And so I know about as much as you do about what's going to be happening. So just a little bit of background about NSF. It's an independent federal funding agency that supports science and engineering across all the states and territories. So when I say it's an independent federal agency, it means we do not report to a cabinet member. It's just a separate entity. So the director is a political appointee, but we're otherwise independent. It was established in 1950 to promote the progress of science, advance national health, prosperity, and welfare, and secure the national defense. Those are our mission. We support about 25% of the federal support for basic research at colleges and universities. So when we say basic research, that's the sort of fundamental inquiry that's driven by curiosity, for discovery, rather than something that is applied, which is, for a particular use. Although now we do have some solutions-oriented research as well. NSF is organized into directorates and offices. The list of those is here. I'm not going to get into too much detail about these because they all have really nice websites that you can go and check out. I don't have direct experience in all of them, and I think what you're interested in is going to vary by what your research background or interests are. And so if I go on and on about these, most of them you're not going to be interested in. In addition, there's going to be some structural change, and that is held up right now by a legal injunction. So we don't know exactly what all that's going to look like. I sit in the Office of Integrative Activities, which is under the Office of the Director. That has several units, but the program is in OIA. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the research enterprise. And I want to talk about this for two reasons. One is it is the topic of the program that I run for NSF. And two, because I think it can be really helpful to understand the much broader context of the work that you do as researchers. And I think it's a little hard to gain that perspective for most people, so I'm going to share it with you today. Before I get into that, is there anything in the chat that I need to be addressing?
Actually, we do have a question, Dr. O'Brien.
Okay.
Romina wondered, in relation to the poll, how is a scientist classified who held a tenured position in their home country, but when they relocated to the US, they started over as an assistant professor. They had no record with US grants. So they may appear to be early career, but the end of their PhD defense complicates that classification. So
Sure. I think for the purposes of the poll, it was just for me to get a sense of who the audience was. So were you people who had submitted lots of grants and had tons of experience and didn't need to be exposed to basic kinds of principles, or were you people who were just starting out and needed to know, everything from square one? So that to me sounds like it's sort of both. Yeah, it was just to trigger off. Yeah. So you have lots of experience doing the work, but maybe not as much exposure to the particular agencies that you would be applying for. Okay, am I good to keep rolling?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So for Granted, which is about advancing the national research enterprise, we think of the research enterprise as three components. So the first is the institutions and organizations that house research. So that will be, that'll include all the facilities, the buildings and so on, equipment, resources. It's the investigators and teams, so all of you on this call, or many of you, and then the research support and service infrastructure. So that's also some of you on this call. So that's all the human capital, so the people who support making all of that research happen. So they enable all of the research. And I'm gonna break these down a little bit more. Normally we would kind of stop here in a granted presentation, but I'm gonna get into more detail with each of these. So for the institutions and organizations, this is going to be the labs. So this could be a single investigator's lab. It could be a shared facility, maybe a clean room, something like that. Like, you know, the kitted out space that has fume hoods and safety and whatever else in it. Equipment, that could be field gear. So for me as a soil scientist, I needed soil corers and, you know, shovels and things like that. It could be something like a sample processing robot if you're extracting a bunch of DNA from samples. It could be 3D printers. It could be something like a helium recycling system if you have, you know, a bunch of NMRs or something like that. Instrumentation, which is different from equipment because instrumentation is something that collects data. So that could be like mass spectrometers, NMRs, DNA sequencers, you know, whatever instruments you have that collect data for whatever the research is you're doing. It could be computing resources, so high performance computing, clusters, storage, whatever, that kind of compute infrastructure. And then other space too. So there's other space you use in the context of research, like the room that you all are sitting in right now, conference rooms, auditoriums, offices, and so on. So I want to use the example of an animal facility. Maybe some of you do animal-based research, and if you don't, maybe you're aware that people do animal-based research. They do studies on mice and rats and things. For that, you would need a building, and that's usually a pretty specialized building that's probably secure, you know, limited access. It's going to have cages or aquaria or whatever, and like those cages are pretty high tech. I mean, those ventilated rat cages that house like dozens and dozens and dozens of rodents are expensive. It's going to be things like cage washers and autoclaves and you know, all that kind of equipment to support that facility, including maybe an environmental monitoring system. I recently helped write a proposal back at my home institution to the tune of $500,000 to be able to measure temperature, humidity, and light in all of our animal facilities. It could be advanced HVAC systems for that building, maybe some clean space if you're going to do notobiotic work or something like that. So a lot of stuff goes into that. But the thing that we're really interested in for granted, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm still in the investigators. We're interested in investigators too. But this is going to be the faculty, the trainees, you know, postdocs, grad students, undergrads, anybody who's involved in actually conducting research, and then all the collaborators, so those teams and networks you bring. So this is everybody who's actually engaged in the process of discovery and inquiry. So in our animal facility, this would be the investigators, of course, the PIs, but it would also be, say, veterinarians or specialized surgeons or instrument technicians or animal technicians who are doing the research. And then we have the research support and service infrastructure. This is granted sweet spot. So this is going to be the people, processes, and policies. For people, this could be your institutional leaders, like your vice president or vice chancellor for research. Maybe they have some associate vice chancellors for research who specialize in different areas. It could be legal counsel. They certainly have some input into things that happen with research and the research environment at your institution. Maybe finance, if they're working on budgets and financial support for research, compliance people, HR people. If you get a grant and you need to hire someone, what do you do? Like, how do you get that job description written appropriately, and how do you get it off of your computer and out into the world so people know to apply for it? Somebody has to do something for that, right? It could be processes. So payment processes, proposal submissions. So you have a project idea and you have written a proposal that is on your computer. It has to get to me at the NSF. There's a whole bunch of processes in place to make that happen, to get it from you to me and make sure it's all compliant. Hiring systems, so as I was saying before, getting people hired, there's processes in place to make that happen. What if you have a complaint? What if you think somebody plagiarized? What do you do? Like, there's a process in place for dealing with those kinds of things. And then policies. So maybe there's a PI eligibility policy at your institution, like who's allowed to submit a proposal. Somebody's got to have decided that, probably involving, like, I don't know, a faculty senate or something. Proposal submission deadlines. So maybe at your institution, you have to submit your proposal 5 days in advance or something like that. So all kinds of other infrastructure to be able to support you doing research. And a lot of it, you don't even know is happening. And that's great. You shouldn't have to, because that's not your job as an investigator. So for our animal facility example, these could be animal care technicians, like the people who are like feeding the animals. Maybe there's a system to take the census of the animals and connected with that, do the billing for the per diem rates of housing those animals. There could be a submission and tracking system for the animal care approval process, maybe an audit system for that. So there's a lot that goes into all of this besides just, your fantastic idea and you making measurements. And in this case, the you I'm directing to is the faculty, but I understand that there's administrators in the room too. So this slide is meant to be a tiny bit overwhelming, but this is sort of my just, brain dump of other kinds of support functions that you might not ever think about if you're an investigator. So maybe you would like to submit a patent application and somebody helps you do that. Maybe there are specialized accreditations for particular, specialties or functions at your campus. Maybe there's limited submissions, like where the sponsor only allows one submission per institution. Somebody has to figure out who's going to be the one. IRB review panels if you have human subjects research. IP disclosures if you've discovered things. Maybe there's single audit responses. So you might not know that your institution is probably subject to something called a single audit. And so they come and do all these, like they test things. So, they could be asking questions like, why was this payment paid in July when the grant ended in June? Someone has to address that. And probably if you are a faculty member, you don't want to do that at all, right? And so you would like there to be somebody else who will. Drawdowns and cash transfers, like maybe you may or may not know, if you're an investigator, that this all works on a reimbursement schedule. So somebody at your university has to submit your expenses and then get the university reimbursed from your grants. Like, it's not like the NSF just transfers $500,000 to your university to a bank account. It doesn't work that way. So, people have to be making sure all of this flows. Like I said before, job postings, compliance reviews, like making sure that when you submit your proposal, everything is good to go so it doesn't get kicked back out of the system because your budgets don't match up or something. Shared services billing. Budget projections. You'd probably like to know how much money you have left on your grant. Data repository system resources. So, the sponsors require a data management use and sharing plan. Maybe you would like there to be a way to do that at your institution besides just your own personal laptop, Proposal editing, effort reporting. So, you can't have so many grants that you have more than 100% of your time covered, and that has to be tracked somehow. Controlled substance approvals. If you're going to work with cocaine or something in your animal research plan. Like somebody's got to keep track of that and make sure that everything's good to go. Or corporate partnership agreements. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could work with Google on this thing? Well, you'd probably need somebody who's going to like know how to talk to Google and get those MOUs in place to be able to do work together. All right, so I really like this tweet from a few years ago that says, universities pay staggering salaries to presidents, chancellors, VPs, and provosts by the dozens. And in every administrative office, there's a 57-year-old woman named Peggy with a title like admin assistant too. And that's the only person who actually runs the university. So I think this is really funny. And in my university, there is named Peggy who pretty much runs the sponsored programs pre-award office. So I get it. All right, so I wanted to address briefly who pays for all of this. Some of it comes out of your university's general budget. So maybe some of the, these people are paid for by, if you're a state university, like some kind of state salary line, or, some other operating expenses. But a lot of it is going to come from the facilities and administration costs that are part of your award. So, when you submit a proposal, there's this F&A piece, and if you tend to apply to NSF, where the funding solicitations tell you your limit for total costs, you're really bummed out that some of this money is going to go to F&A, and you're probably like, what is it even used for? If you're submitting to NIH, their solicitations tend to give the direct cost limit. And so you probably don't really think all that much about F&A because it's just on top. But so F&A sometimes is called indirect costs, or so institutions will call it IDC, indirect costs, or maybe ICR, indirect cost recovery. Like there's different lingo at different places. Some places call it just overhead. So each institution, how this currently works, each institution negotiates an indirect cost recovery rate with a cognizant federal agency. So that's usually Health and Human Services or Office of Naval Research. And so there's all this complicated stuff that goes into it. So the institution has to account for the space that is used for federal research. And, I don't even know, like it's very complicated to negotiate this, to the point where there's like all these consultants that will even come and help the university figure this out and do this negotiation every, 3 to 5 years, however often they have to re-up it. So this pays for all of this research support infrastructure that can't be directly allocated to a single award. So it's like, Peggy, who's running the university, she's not working just for your project, she's working for everybody's project. So how do you account for her time? Well, she's just part of the infrastructure, so she's going to be part of that facilities and administration. In that case, it would be administration. So this F&A is not applied to equipment or capital expenditures, subawards that exceed $50,000, or participant support costs. So that's helpful for things like NSF. If you put in your budget participant support costs, like you're going to pay for people to attend a thing, and then you want to change it later, you got to get special permission because you're changing it, the F&A tax that's put on it. This can have a huge impact on the function and culture of your institution because it's part and parcel with the business model. And I didn't ask what types of institutions everybody here is from. At smaller institutions, well, not smaller institutions, but it's institutions with smaller federal research portfolios, this is going to have less of an impact because it's just less of the overall budget of the institution. At a large research institution like mine, this money really adds up. And so how it flows down and how it's allocated across the institution really matters. So at my institution, most of this money goes to the colleges. The deans, like if you submit a proposal out of engineering, half of that F&A goes to the College of Engineering. And then they're supposed to support things. They're supposed to be supporting your PEGIs within the college. And other things, your space, your infrastructure, your fume hoods, functioning, all that stuff. And so what that means in my college is or my university, the vice chancellor for research doesn't get that much money. And so more is left to the colleges than is done centrally. At other places, most of that money is held centrally and very little gets spread out. And so that means there's a lot more top-down institutional decisions about how money is allocated and spent because of how this F&A works. This might be changing. We'll get back to that. So before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other players in this research enterprise that are outside of individual institutions. So this is the federal agencies. We've already touched on this a little bit. They're supporting basic and applied research through grants, but they're also going to kind of influence policy a little bit. So when NIH rolled out its data use and sharing requirements, well, now every university has to figure out how they're going to deal with storing and sharing data. Or some of the foreign influence policies that come through the federal agencies, or like when NSF years ago rolled out the required mentoring plan. Well, now everybody was really focused on how they were going to do postdoc mentoring because now it's required by this federal agency. Foundations are another player in the ecosystem. They tend to be a little bit more discipline specific or maybe regional. I don't have a whole lot here on this slide or other slides, but I'm happy to talk more about foundation funding if you would like. I'm not a foundation relations person, but I work very closely with them, so I know a bit. But they're going to have really different their solicitations and so on are going to be different, like much less technical usually, and the review is usually less technical, and often the sign off is by the board, and that could be like, if it's a family foundation, that could be like the family. So really different kind of review process than a federal agency. Industry funds research, and sometimes that's funding for students or interns, student interns. So the students could be going to the company, or the company could be funding students at the institution, like through scholarships and so on. It could be research partnerships, so actual R&D collaborations or them funding R&D at your institution, or it could be through corporate philanthropy, where the company has money set aside that they use, as tax write-offs and stuff, that they could fund things like research or capital expenses or so on. Professional societies also play a big role. Sometimes they give fellowships or seed funding. They also do a lot of advocacy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. And then, of course, community development, like when you go to their conferences or read their newsletters or whatever else. There's also an important role for government relations people. So this could be people that are employed by an institution like a college or university or research institute or something. There are also lots of really effective government relations consulting firms, that get contracted by your institution. And so they can do lobbying. They can do, not necessarily lobbying, but advocacy with your federal delegation, just letting them know what's going on at your institution research-wise. Like sometimes they make, like fact sheets and so on. Or they can also bring information back. So they can be saying, here's what's coming down the pike. So the ones that I worked with would attend all of the the advisory committees for all of the federal agencies, and then let us know what happened. Seems like, cancer is kind of going this direction, or they're going to prioritize this or that. So it worked both ways. They could advocate for us, and then they could tell us what was happening. And then there are all manner of consultants out there. So there are grant writers, grant editors, there are people who help with strategic planning for you as an individual investigator for your institution. Like I said before, there's consultants that help with F&A negotiations. Consultants that help do it. And that can be kind of great, because if you're an institution that doesn't need a big office of, say, strategic planning, maybe you need a one-off. And so, you need help with this, and then it's going to be done, and you can move forward. You don't need to hire somebody permanent to do that. Or maybe you need someone like me, like a research development person, and you don't need a whole office of this. You just maybe need someone who's going to help part-time. And so then you can get that fractional help through consultants. Okay. I wanted to take a second just to stop briefly and ask if anybody can think of anything else. I know we're in webinar mode. I wasn't quite expecting that. So, but I'll stop now and see if there's any questions, or if you can think of any other pieces of this federal or this research ecosystem that you think we should talk about. Good. Pause for like 3 minutes, not 3 minutes, that's too long. I'll pause for 30 seconds. If you want to put anything in the chat.
I don't have anything in the chat right now, but they're also welcome to raise their hand, Sarah, so we can take
Oh,
the
great.
questions
Okay.
that way too.
Great.
And will you share your slides?
Yes, I think so. I will double check that I am authorized to do that, but yes.
Yes. So as soon as you do, we'll go ahead and add them to Canvas for the people registered. I think you have just over 220 people in the room right now, but there's 550 or more registered. So we'll want to be able to share them with everyone, and it'll be recorded as well.
Great.
And Jennifer does have a question for you, Sarah. So can you tell us more about what NSF offers for funding in the current climate in terms of educational initiatives? What will replace perception, action, cognition?
No. Sorry, I
Fair
can't
enough.
answer that because I don't know. I don't know the answer. There's definitely some restructuring starting in the Director of Education, but like I said, that's paused with this court injunction, and also we don't know what's going to be in the next budget. So I don't know. I'm sorry. Okay, before, oh, sorry.
We all wish we knew.
We all wish we knew, yes. Okay, before I get more questions that I can't answer, I will continue on. All right, so I wanted to point out that there are many, okay, sorry, I just was looking in the chat. There are many professional organizations. So all of the faculty on this call, I mean, you probably know your professional organizations. So mine were American Geophysical Union, the Soil Science Society of America, the Ecological Society of America. But those same kinds of organizations exist for all of those research support and service roles as well. I wanted to just, point out there's the National Association of College and University Business Officers, the National Organization of Research Development Professionals, I'm in that one, one on responsibility in medicine and research, broader or research impact in society, all of these other organizations, which means that both this is professional work, and the people who do this work are professionals. And I know sometimes there's a little bit of tension that way when we have investigators working with the support crew. So I just wanted to kind of point this out and say that there's this work is complex enough that these organizations exist. So what do they do for us? I wanted to give a couple of examples, and one that is really top of mind right now is this huge collaboration led by the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities with all of these other really significant organizations that are tackling the FNA model. So as I said before, FNA is negotiated by each institution, and it's this super complex process. And it's been made clear by the federal administration that this is like not going to fly. Like this is not going to continue. And so all these organizations have gotten together and made this just heroic effort to figure out, well, what can we do instead? What do we offer as a solution? And they've been starting to roll out webinars. There was one yesterday on a couple of models, and they want feedback. So I just think this is a great solution or example of all these external organizations that are part of the national research enterprise coming together to try to solve a problem on behalf of all of us. And you can go look up more about it. I'm sorry I didn't include a link to it. Oh, I was expecting another slide there. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to Granted. I don't know what happened to the other slide. Maybe we'll find it in a little bit. So Granted is an NSF initiative that started a few years ago to address problems and gaps in this research support and service infrastructure nationally. So we think of this as this Granted wheel. It's behind me, and now it's on this slide. So all these different aspects of research support and service. So it could be research development. So this is people who help connect faculty with funding opportunities, put together teams, help you stay abreast of what's happening in DC, perhaps help prepare large or complex proposals, training, all sorts of things. Research administration, we tend to think of as the pre-award and post-award support, so helping you submit your grant and helping you spend your grant. Research data analytics, more and more universities are realizing they have access to lots of data that they can use to make strategic decisions about where to invest, where their strengths are, where they could be building up more capability in their institution. Technology commercialization, so that's everything related to IP, tech transfer, that kind of thing, spinoffs. Corporate relations would be, I think I mentioned this, and those get kind of complex, and it's sort of a little bit different way of communicating. Research integrity and compliance, this has just exploded, the requirements for research integrity and compliance. So this is everything from conflict of interest, it could be foreign influence, sorry, I'm spacing the word I want to say, but all the things that research security, all the things that are about keeping research compliant and safe. It could be institutional capacity to manage student research training, research communications. When you see really well-written stories about research, it really lands, and that is a skill and a capability that not every place has. Research policy, so how to develop things like PI eligibility or grant submission deadlines or whatever other kind of complex things there are to have policies about. And then developing research leaders. How does someone go from being an assistant professor to being a vice president for research? What does that career path look like? How do they gain the skills they need? So we see significant challenges in the research enterprise across the national ecosystem. There are huge disparities in hiring and attrition rates for staff across different types of institutions. So this could be regionally, it could be institution types. So maybe your big R1 research heavy institutions are able to recruit lots of people and pay them lots of money, and smaller places keep losing staff to those big ones. That's a pattern that we have observed or been told about. There's a lot of disparities in training and access to professional society engagement or other networks. If you are the lone grant administrator at your institution, you might not be able to travel and have time away to go do professional development and attend conferences of all those societies that I mentioned before. Federal funding isn't evenly distributed, and so places that have all this expertise and capability are able to submit more grants, and those grants are going to be more compliant and better quality, often, not always, but they have more of that capability to develop those proposals. And we would like to see that be more equitably distributed so that the faculty who are at smaller institutions who have just fabulous research ideas are able to actually get those ideas submitted in the form of proposals. Like, we don't want to see those ideas just get squashed because there's nobody to help you make your budget. And then the investments in research support don't necessarily match the faculty need, like I was just saying. Maybe you have faculty who have just chomping at the bit to pursue research ideas and there's nobody to help them. Or it might not match the institutional mission. So the institution is saying, we want to do research, and they're not investing in the staff to be able to support that research to grow. So where does funding for the research enterprise come from? For the institutions and organizations, there are some different funding opportunities. I'm highlighting NIH and NSF because those are the ones I'm most familiar with. There are others. I'm not forgetting that NASA and USDA and others exist. And I'm also not intending to ignore social science or humanities or anything like that. I'm just sort of talking about what I know best. And not being able to see the room. So just kind of guessing. But there's NIH has this C06 grant, which is for facilities renovation. It's up to like $8 million. So that's pretty good, pretty big. There's S10, which is for equipment. S10 is for instrumentation. R21 is for equipment. So things like those helium recyclers I mentioned before. NSF has the Major Research Instrumentation Awards. They have this mid-scale infrastructure thing, this other infrastructure awards. Also, this kind of capital investment comes from your state when your state approves a new building, if you're a state institution, or maybe through major gifts. There's the Gorman Center for blah, 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 because, you have a rich alumni who would like to give a lot of money for a building. The investigators, teams, and trainees are funded by most grants. Most research grants are funding that. And then also fellowships. And those fellowships could come from federal agencies, foundations, professional societies, all kinds of places. But then where does the funding for the research support and service infrastructure come from? Like I said before, it's F&A, state lines, just general operating expenses. But what if you want to innovate? What if you have an idea to make it better that you want to test? You can get funding from NIH. There's this one particular program, BREESPAD, but that's really focused on biomedical. Or you can come to Granted if you would like to get funding for research and service and support infrastructure that is more general. So we seek ideas that will increase access to discovery and innovation, right? Our ultimate goal is to make more research from more places. Catalyze national transformation of the research enterprise and address systemic barriers within the research enterprise system. So we have a program description that funds convenings, planning grants, and standard grants. We do not have any solicitations. We do occasionally issue a Dear Colleague letter. I must say a little bit more about that towards the end. We have 3 themes that must be addressed in every proposal, at least one of these themes. So these are enhancing practices and processes within the research enterprise, human capital within the research enterprise, and translating effective practices related to research enterprise into diverse institutional and organizational contexts through partnerships with professional societies and organizations. A little long, but it's all the things I've been talking about. So we have some unique features of our program. Our fearless leader and champion rotators who launched this program, I think at least a couple of them are on the line here too, enacted a vision for this program where anybody can be a lead organization. So there's very few limits to our program overall, and that was intentional. So any institution or organization or entity that is eligible for NSF is eligible for Granted. Anyone can be a principal investigator who has the expertise to lead the project. You don't need to be a faculty member. You don't need a PhD. You just need to be doing the work that you are proposing to do and have that expertise. We have no deadlines, no institutional limits, so there can be as many proposals from an organization as you'd like, and there is no budget ceiling for the projects. We do not fund disciplinary research of any kind. It has to be something about institutional capacity that is discipline agnostic. We don't fund any incentives for faculty or students. So we don't do like summer buyouts so faculty have more time to do research, or stipends for students to go off and do research. We'll fund faculty training if it's for them to gain research administration skills, research leadership skills. And grad students and postdocs can be on the grants. They can be funded by the project to do the project work, but not just to go do research. So I'm gonna zip through this information about Granted, just to kind of give you a sense of what we've done. And I will say along with this that I've said a couple times, we don't know what's happening with the budget next year. We don't know what's happening with the big beautiful bill, how we will fit into it. And so, you know, take all this with that caveat in mind. So we've funded almost every state and territory with research convenings and planning grants. The initiative started by releasing a call for convenings. So we had a bunch of those. Most of them are winding down or are finished, although we will still fund new ones. We've made mostly research grants, about half research grants, and most of our award dollars went to research grants rather than convenings or planning grants. The planning and convenings are under $100,000. That's an NSF policy, not ours. And so that's why most of the awards are in that range, but otherwise they're in the $1 to $5 million range. And in, mostly 1 to 2 years, but going up to 5 years. More than half of the awards have been made to institutions that are not R1, so not the highest research activity. So we support all types of institutions and organizations, and also a number of awards that aren't to institutions of higher education. We are already seeing culture change and transformation of the research enterprise. We feel like we are making the visible the invisible visible, and we are seeding some novel partnerships. Really a lot of new activity in this space and a lot of innovation happening. I'm gonna I see some things coming in the chat. Is the proposal submission process for NSF Granted the same? Yes. I'm gonna talk more about that at the end. Is there anything else that okay, great. So some testimonials. These are coming from people in the research administration community broadly. So one of the most profound impacts has been elevating research administrators as critical drivers of institutional success on a global scale. And I'll say, I think that's true. If you don't have good research administration, it is going to hold you back from doing your research. This funding has allowed us to streamline administrative processes, providing targeted faculty training and develop mentorship programs that empower researchers to pursue interdisciplinary and high-impact projects. Again, we want to see the research come forward. Granted's focus on creating national change has encouraged regions to come together in common spirit to make themselves collectively competitive rather than on an individual basis. We love to see this. We love to see, working together to achieve something more rather than having all of these institutions competing. So I think I have time for these examples. Although I'm gonna go through these pretty quick because I'd rather get to the stuff that I have at the end. So these are some examples of projects that Granted has funded. This one is a conference, but it did a lot of work to help establish a national job classification system for research administrators. So this didn't exist. There isn't a national job classification system or standard like job titling across the board for research administrators. So this project did a lot of work. They did this big survey to understand what research administrators with different titles do. And a lot of that data is available at the website that I've got there. The project from University of Alabama, Birmingham, together with these other organizations, that is working to make a curriculum for undergraduate training, like an undergraduate minor in research administration. So maybe not nobody, but basically nobody comes to college thinking that they're going to be a grant administrator. Like that's just not a thing that most people know about, that they think about. But these are good jobs, right? These are interesting, high-paying jobs in some cases. And so really want to bring more people into this as a career, and this will help. This is another workforce development grant at Tufts and Bunker Hill Community College that is doing an internship program to bring people into research administration and compliance. So it's bringing the community college students in to understand the research administration happening at Tufts. Marquette University has a project optimizing their post-award processes. So they're creating a dashboard to help faculty and administrators help people on the campus understand what's going on with award spending and improve their processes and workflows. We have an award from University of Idaho and Southern Utah University that is developing AI tools to help automate processes. And I think they're mostly focused on post-award also. I'm not positive about that, but to help improve their model, their workflows there, and make it so their staff are able to do more for the faculty. All right, so that was what I wanted to talk about with Granted. Now I want to talk about advice for developing competitive proposals. We've got poll number 2, and it's just about 4 o'clock. Should I keep going or should we take like a 5-minute bio break? No, okay, keep going. Okay. We will plow ahead.
Unless you need a bio break, of course.
No, I'm okay. I'm okay. Can you launch poll 2, please? Are there responses?
Yes, we're at about 53%. Oh, still going.
Okay. So at least 53% of you are still paying attention. That's great.
Over 60%, Sarah. They're
Over
still going.
60%. Y'all are so good. 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
impressed.
pretty impressed. They're over 70 now.
Fantastic.
Coming in just under 50%. I haven't written one yet, but it's time to start. 26% on I've submitted at least one, but haven't been successful. 19% on I support development of other people's proposals, and 8% of I have a long track record of grant success.
All right, so that means, oh, can I go slower? Sure. I will try.
I think they're taking notes. So we've had a couple of
Okay.
people comment that they're taking notes.
But
Oh,
there
wow.
will be a recording of this, so you can go back and rewatch the sections you need to.
Okay, so that means about 90% of people are either ready to start writing or have tried and need to hone their skills a little bit, or are supporting others. So let's dive into this. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about other than soil. So, starting broad, my advice is to learn how your preferred sponsor works. If you tend to go to NIH, if NIH is your bread and butter, you should know, or maybe you already know, that they use study sections and counsel. And I am not an NIH expert, so it's possible somebody could jump in and correct me if I'm saying things that are not quite right. But NIH study sections are standing panels. And so if you submit, like there's like some strategy in identifying which study section you want to be submitting to. So NIH is organized into institutes and centers. Within those, there's programs, and within those study sections. So, so you probably want to find like a mentor to help you figure this out. Although I think NIH has some resources also to help direct you. But that's going to be a standing panel of people, and it's usually published. So you kind of know what that panel is going to be, that study section. And if you resubmit something to that same study section, you're going to get the same people. And so NIH lets you usually write like a cover letter about what you've changed if you do a resubmission. And I think you're only allowed to submit once usually. And then after study section, it's going to go to council and for like the final sign off. NSF doesn't work that way like at all. So, you know, we're organized into those directorates, and then there's divisions or offices and programs that take proposals. We organize a panel, a new panel for each, a new set of people for each review panel. So it is like totally ad hoc every time. So we're getting tons of fresh expertise in all the time. It's confidential. You don't ever know who was on your review panel. And if you submit again, you are probably going to get a whole different set of reviewers. So that's a pretty big difference. With foundations, it is anybody's guess. That's not true. They tell you usually, not always. But for foundations, there may or may not be subject matter experts employed by the foundation. And they may or may not be sent out for external review. There may or may not be panels. Usually the board has the final approval. Sometimes that's family members of the board, or, you know, it could be, you know, if it's like some kind of regional foundation that doesn't have a really strict topical focus, it could be reviewers who are well outside of your expertise. And so in general, you need to be a little bit more less technical or less, you know, specific in a foundation proposal. And then you want to think about how your sponsor approaches portfolio balance. So like for a mission-driven agency like Department of Energy or DoD or like ARPA-H or DARPA, they have ideas of things they want to fund. They have a program, and they need the projects to be advancing that program of that mission. So like if you look at DARPA or ARPA-H, those program managers come in for 3 years. They have an agenda. So they are going to spend that money on their agenda. I mean, they put out really specific solicitations. I saw an ARPA-H one where they wanted to kit out like vans that were going to go around and do rural health, and they needed to have like an MRI machine, all these things. Like that program manager came in with an agenda. Contrast that to NSF that just wants to fund the best research, or same with NIH for the most part. So for NIH, those study sections, I think I have more information about this in a couple slides, but they're going to score your proposal on a scale of 1 to 9, and then they're going to like rank them, and there is a pay line. And so like everything above this pay line is what's going to get funded, and everything below isn't. NSF doesn't work that way. We don't score numerically. At least I don't think any programs do. Ours doesn't. And so there's a little bit more influence from agencies like DOE and probably NASA, USDA, probably NEA and NIH, although I'm not as familiar with those, to portfolio balance. You know, we've already funded 3 projects like this. We don't need another one that's addressing the same question or using the same field site or the same experiments. You know, we need to be looking at more things. Also, and this is again my observations, this isn't NSF saying this in any way, but you kind of over time notice some differences in sort of institutional culture that are associated with this. So my observation about NIH is they want to fund success. So they want to know that your project is going to work. That means lots of preliminary data, lots of demonstrating that you have a strong environment to do the work, although we'll come to that in a minute. That's no longer a criterion specifically. But they want to know that you have a track record of success for this thing. You've got preliminary data showing it's going to work. They want to fund success. Other agencies, in my observation, tend to want to fund things that aren't going to happen any other way. So, oh my gosh, if we don't get this money, we are not going to be able to do this experiment and make this amazing discovery. So you better fund us. Versus like, this is so awesome and so successful, like it's going to happen. You just want to be in on it. So I'm exaggerating, of course, but you know, kind of thinking about like what's the sort of culture and then that impacts the presentation of your ideas a little bit. So talk to your program manager. Everybody tells you this. If for the investigators in the session right now. Everybody's going to tell you, talk to your program manager. And for some reason you are afraid to do it and you won't do it and you should do it. You should do it. I'm a program manager. I'm not scary. Come talk to me. So how can you do this? You can attend proposers days for agencies who have that, and sometimes they're required. So I know that DARPA and ARPA-H have proposers days, and maybe some other DoD entities do as well. And this is going to be where you come and you have to present something maybe, and you have these one-on-one meetings, and it's like real essential. Some of these agencies do road shows where they will come around and come and do a regional thing. And the point of it is for this funding program to be interacting with the potential awardees in the area. Some programs have office hours. Granted, was having office hours once a week. Anybody could come. That's on pause. We don't know if it'll come back. But then a lot of programs will do specific office hours sessions ahead of a major solicitation deadline. You got to really watch out, because there are some agencies, and I want to say some DoD are like this, and maybe oh shoot, I can't think of the health services, HRSA might be this way too. I'm not sure, where they have a deadline, and after this deadline, you can't ask any more questions of the program manager. So you kind of got to watch out for that. You could talk to them at conferences. We go to conferences. If you go to conferences, often the relevant program managers are there because they want to have meetings with their funded PIs. They want to see what's coming out. Maybe they do some town hall kind of things. You can send them project summaries. So for Granted, you can send a 2-pager to one to 2-pager to granted@nsf.gov, and then we'll get back to you. Usually that's a meeting, not always. And then you can just send emails. Someone has put in the chat, I've submitted 10 grants, always talk to the program manager, never won. I am so sorry to hear that. Yes, I have suggestions. That's the rest of the presentation. Okay. You should start early. You should start by talking to your grant administrator. They also have other work that they do, and they would probably like to plan their workload to accommodate your grant. So if you come to them the day before it's due and you have this big complex budget and so on, they might not have time for you because they might already have their time allocated to somebody else. Or maybe their daughter is graduating high school that day, or maybe they're having knee surgery. I mean, I have seen all these things happen where an investigator just does not think about the fact that somebody else has to do a bunch of work for their project. Study the solicitation, look at the required elements. You don't want to be caught 2 days before your deadline and realize you need a letter from your chancellor. How are you going to get that in 2 days? So think about the things you need for your proposal, and think about the review criteria. What are they actually looking for? And are you addressing those things? You can't be like, oh, I mean, it's obvious. It might not be obvious to the reviewers, or that's dumb. No, it's not dumb. And I'm going to tell you why it's not dumb in a few slides. Make a checklist of all the pieces you have to put together and put due dates on those, before the thing is due. So, starting 8 weeks in advance, what are you going to have done by Friday? What are you going to have done by the next Friday? What are everybody else who's working on the project, what are they responsible for? When are those deliverables due? Because all these pieces, rely on each other. Within that, there's some things you need to prioritize, and this is just being really practical. You are thinking about your big idea. You're thinking about how you are going to look at soil aggregates and the phosphorus and blah, blah, blah. But you need to be thinking about your grant application, which requires a lot of other stuff. So prioritize the pieces of it where you need something from somebody else. Because like I said before, you don't want to be coming to somebody the day before you need it, and then they may not be available to help you. So your budget, you probably will need somebody else to do something for your budget, help you prepare it, vet it, approve it, compliance check it, something. Work on your budget first. And it's going to be real painful, because if you're still working on your project plan, you might not exactly know how much money it's going to take, because you might be like, well, I don't know. I might take 100 samples or 200 samples, and that's going to change your costs. It's really frustrating. They are going to be asking for your budget way in advance, and that is for good reason because they have a lot of work they have to do on it. Subaward materials. So if you're going to be working with another institution, there's all this stuff that has to go back and forth that you, as the investigator, probably don't have all that much you have to do with it, but other people have to do stuff. So think about that. Do you have a project that's going to need an evaluation plan or a logic model? Unless you're a social scientist, you probably don't know how to make a logic model. They are really big, complex documents that have to go in your proposal. If you're doing something with training or, like, I guess mostly training. And mostly I've seen them for training grants, but there's probably other things that require program evaluation is usually how it's phrased. But that usually has to be an external person. That person needs to know what activities you're proposing before they can figure out how to evaluate the activities you're proposing. They need time. Letters. So letters of collaboration or commitment or support take time for somebody else to put together and sign and route. So you need to get those done in advance. I'm going to say a little side note about letters. I didn't put this anywhere else in the talk. NSF has these super strict requirements for letters. So if somebody is going to collaborate with you, like say, if you're thinking about applying for grants, it's for the grant administrators on the call, and you're going to do like an NCURA review of your institutional processes, maybe NCURA writes a letter. Maybe somebody is going to allow you to access a field site, or maybe, whatever, they're going to collaborate. It's like a 2-sentence, very prescribed letter that just makes everyone aware that this person is actually on board with working with you. For NIH, oh my gosh, these letters turn into these like glorious, recommendations of your achievements and your brilliance and how amazing this program is going to be. So there's these big endorsements of your project. So they're different, and you can use them to help tell the story of your project, which I'm going to get into more in a little bit. Same thing with institutional commitment. Sometimes you need to show that the institution has some skin in the game. This is very rare for NSF, but not so rare for NIH and others, where the institution is going to buy something. It's going to pay for something that will help you do this project if you were to get funded by the sponsor. Sometimes there's a pre-proposal or a letter of intent that's required. NIH, I think, has a letter of intent that's optional for pretty much every solicitation. They're a good idea to do because they help the program know what's coming and how to plan review. And then limited submission approval. So sometimes the sponsor will limit the number of applications that are allowed from each institution. And so you have to get your institutional internal approval. That can sometimes be a real pain. So make sure you know how your institution communicates that so that you know to look for it and get your slot assigned if you want it. Okay, so here again, I'm comparing and contrasting NSF and NIH. I am sorry to leave out other agencies, but these are the ones that I felt like I could speak to with enough authority to mention on a slide. NSF review criteria are intellectual merit and broader impacts. That's it. So every proposal is evaluated on these 2 criteria, and they're scored usually on a range of excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor. In contrast, and so then there's a funding recommendation that's made out of all of that. For NIH, the evaluation criteria have changed in January. So it used to be significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment, and they were each scored 1 to 9. 1 is the best, 9 is the worst. It's changed to this 3-factor thing. So now it's importance of the research, rigor and feasibility, and expertise and resources. My understanding is that this is to help with some of the problems I brought up in the beginning of having such disparities among the success of different types of institutions. So it's still 1 to 9. The expertise is considered in the overall impact, but it's not scored. And then there's some other things that matter too that I didn't put on the slide, about the animal safety protocols and things like that. So like I said before, NIH has these pay lines, this cutoff. And then you'll usually get an email asking for just-in-time documentation. So they want some of the stuff that you didn't have to submit initially. NSF kind of does that too, but they don't call it just-in-time the same way. And I imagine all the other agencies do the same. I know when I worked at the DOE lab, which has been 10 years ago, they had something kind of similar. And again, it's been a while since I've been on a DOE panel, but they functioned much more like NSF than like NIH. Okay, so intellectual merit and broader impacts. What is this? And now from here on out, I'm focusing much more on NSF because I think you're going to have other speakers from NIH who I imagine will address the intricacies of those better. So intellectual merit, the importance of the proposed activity. Should it be done? Will it advance knowledge and understanding within its field or across fields? Is it creative, original, or potentially transformative? And will the expected contributions be significant? Then how well conceived and organized is it? So can it be done? So first, should it be done? And then can it be done? So you could have an awesome idea that would change the world, but man, it is like never going to happen. So those are two components of this. So for can it be done, the soundness and feasibility of the approach, the evaluation, the research plan. So that includes, what are you going to do and how are you going to know if you did it? How are you going to know if you're successful? How qualified is the team, the data management plan, the mentoring plan, the resources, equipment, facilities, all that stuff we talked about in the beginning, and the budget. And the budget is more about sort of scope. They're not looking, the criteria are not about details of the budget, like is this or that category right or wrong? It's more about, are they asking for the resources they need to do this work? So thinking about this potential to advance knowledge, what is the potential to advance the knowledge? Do these activities suggest and explore creative or original or interesting concepts? Is the plan well-reasoned, well-organized? Does it have a strong rationale? So that's going to be things like your literature review. Like, are you showing that this is important and needs to be done and has not been done? It's still like a knowledge gap. Is your team qualified? Do you have all the right expertise to be actually able to do all the things you say you're going to do? And do you have all the resources to do it? Broader impacts is going to be the benefits to society from doing this work. So that could come from the research itself. This research itself will benefit society. It could be activities that are directly related to the project or that are supported by it, but are complementary to the project. So here you're thinking about the benefits to society and the ability to advance desired societal outcomes. Again, with this creative, original, potentially transformative, but now focused on the broader impacts. Is it well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on sound rationale, but now focused on the broader impacts rather than the intellectual merit? Do you have a plan to incorporate a mechanism to assess success? So this is kind of like that evaluation plan stuff and logic model I was talking about before. How well qualified is your team? And do you have the resources? So continuing the advice, this slide is specifically for granted. We use it specifically for granted, but I think this applies to any proposal. So a good proposal is going to start with a great idea. It doesn't matter how well packaged it is. If it's stupid, it's not going to be successful. You want to have something that's awesome, an awesome idea. Why is it important? You need to show your rationale. Why is this important? Why is it an awesome idea? Has anybody done it before? And so here I'm suggesting, a literature review, but also you can go do an award search. So for NSF, at each program's website, usually near the bottom, it'll say what has been funded by this program. And you can click on that and get a giant list of all the awards funded by that program. And so you can search that and see, have they funded anything like this recently? And that can help you in two ways. It can help you be like, yeah, this is the right program for the idea I have, because the types of things they're funding are in the realm of the thing I want to do. Or it could be like, oh, they have already funded this exact same idea. They're not going to fund another one. So it can go either way. NIH Reporter does this for NIH. And actually, I think there's Federal Reporter that does it for all federal sponsors. It's a little harder to find out what's been funded by foundations. And sometimes if you have a foundation relations person or a research development office or something at bigger institutions, they can help you with that a little bit. You want to talk about the activities and how they're going to address that gap that you described in the beginning. How the activities are going to, okay, this one's specific for Granted, how they're going to benefit your institution, organization, professional society, and others like you. And for that, it would be, if you're not thinking about research administration strictly, you know, how is this going to benefit understanding within your field? How are you going to know you were successful? And for a lot of projects, that's going to be testing a hypothesis and then having an outcome from that. Yes, this worked. No, it didn't. This is what we think might be coming next. For Granted, usually it's an evaluation plan. And then, can you sustain the activities after the NSF support sunsets? And that's sort of specific for Granted because a lot of people are hiring like sponsored programs people or something like that. And we want to know that you're not just going to have to fire them when the grant ends, that there's some kind of way that you're planning to continue the activities. But that you could be thinking about that for other types of research too. You know, what's going to happen when the grant ends? Like, is this going to continue to advance the field? So what I wanted to do with the next few slides is talk about how your total application package can tell a story. And so earlier, I referred to how you might think a lot of documents are kind of pointless, but they don't need to be pointless. You can use those, you can leverage those opportunities to help shape the story that you're trying to tell and make the case for your project. So on the left, I have listed most of the supporting documents that come with regular NSF proposals, so granted proposals. And how you can leverage those to think about the intellectual merit. So this is the intellectual merit criteria, and this is the supporting documents. So your references cited document. I mean, obviously that's the things you cited in your proposal, right? So you're just not plagiarizing ideas. But this can help with the should this be done. So does it advance knowledge and understanding within and across fields? Like you're going to show through the literature that there is this gap, like, but therefore this has been done and this has been done, but we don't know this, therefore we need to do that. And you can show that it's creative and original. You could also use this to think about how qualified your team is. You don't want to only self-cite, but maybe this helps make the case that you do have expertise to do this work. Your letters can show that you have access to the necessary resources and equipment. If you know, your letters talk about collaborators who are going to bring some kind of resource to the table, it can also address your the qualifications of your team. Because if you're missing something and you have a collaborator and they've said, yes, we're going to collaborate on this, that's going to show that you have the team in place. This access to necessary resources can be from letters can really work for NIH grants, especially because you have so much more flexibility to talk about more things in those. Your bio sketches can help make the case for your team. The synergistic activities, same thing. How qualified is the team? Do they have the relevant expertise? Current pending support, same thing. How qualified is your team? Do they already have grants that are relevant to this, but not overlapping? And this also can help with the requested support to show that your budget is scoped appropriately because people have other sources of funds or they don't. Budget justification, same thing, access to resources and obviously the budget. And your facilities, equipment, and other resources document. This is an underutilized tool. This can help with your feasibility aspects. Do you have the facilities and everything you need to be able to do this? Tell us, tell the reviewers. How qualified is your team? So if you have an unfunded collaborator, you can talk about them in the facilities, equipment, and other resources. So they might be supplying a letter that says, yes, I agree to work on this project if it's funded. And then in the facilities document is where you talk about what that person can do. obviously the access to necessary resources and the requested budget. This can make the case that you're asking for the right amount of money because you already have all this other stuff that you need, or we don't have this thing that we need, and so it's in the budget. So for granted specifically, intellectual merit is the potential to create or advance knowledge about the research enterprise. So for us, this is the clarity of the rationale, the team and resources, the alignment with those 3 granted themes I said in the beginning, and then the model itself. So the model of how you will transform or create capacity within your institution or across institutions. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. And then broader impacts would be the potential for national transformation. So this would show up usually in the dissemination plan. So how you are sharing your findings out in the world with the right people, and the sustainability of the activities. Okay, so I was asked to talk a little bit about funding opportunities at NSF, and specifically because Granted does not issue solicitations, we just have a program description. And so how the heck are you supposed to read that program description and know what to do with your grant? So for Granted, we have a program description. Occasionally we issue a Dear Colleague letter, which is just a shorter thing that kind of highlights something that we would encourage more ideas about. And Dear Colleague letters come from all sorts of different programs. This is nothing specific to Granted. Overall, NSF funding opportunities are many and varied, but important things to look for in NSF solicitations are deadlines, budget limits. And for NSF, usually the budget limit that's given is direct cost, not total cost. Is total costs. So that includes the F&A, which means the amount of money you have to spend on your project is less than what the budget cap is. NIH is usually the opposite. Institutional limits. So if they're going to tell you that you're only allowed to submit 1 per institution or 3 per institution, NSF sometimes, not ours, but other programs will say that there's only one application per PI. So, you need to think about, if you're going to collaborate with somebody, what that's going to look like. Excuse me. Some programs have all these tracks. So it's like track 1 is planning grants up to $1 million for a year, and track 2 is up to $60 million for 10 years, and track 3 is this and this. So there's all these different like tracks within the solicitation. And that's because it's kind of hard to get these solicitations written and approved. There's a lot of steps in that process. So if there's something that's related, NSF puts them usually in one solicitation. NIH usually makes companion solicitations, and it will usually say on it the number that is similar, that kind of goes within the program. And then you want to look at eligibility. So both for yourself as a PI and also for your institution. So sometimes it'll say institutions with endowments less than this amount. Well, if you're at a school with a big endowment, you can't apply. So you got to look for that kind of thing. Well, I have listed this as for NSF. This is stuff you have to look for with every funding opportunity ever for all time. So foundations, DOE, USDA, any of them are going to have these kinds of things that you need to keep an eye out for. And those things are going to help you decide if it's something you actually want to apply for. This is way too small. This is not going to be enough money to do the thing I want to do. Or, sometimes there's restrictions on how you can spend the money, well, I really need instruments. I don't need to pay for a bunch of grad students. I need money to do something else. So now I want to go through our program description a little bit. So Granted has no solicitation. How am I supposed to know what to do to write my proposal? So you're going to read critically. We had webinars. They might have gotten taken down since the inauguration. I'm not sure exactly. Normally you would be able to attend our office hours or ask for feedback. And I'm putting these up as sort of general advice. Then you're going to look at the Proposal Award Policies and Procedures Guide, the PAPPG or the PAPG, depending on who you talk to. This has just is just chock-a-block full of very specific information for applying for NSF grants. It has every rule, every guideline, every guidance. Should I have these sections? It's in the PAPPG. Do I need to explain this? It's in the PAPPG. This is like the final word on everything. Every once in a while, there will be something extra or specific in a solicitation. Obviously, we don't have that because we don't have a solicitation. There are some implications to this. When you have no deadline, that means you can take all the time you need to prepare a strong proposal. It also means you don't have a deadline to motivate you. Some NSF programs, I think, and this is coming again from my Sarah O'Brien observations and not necessarily NSF data, but some programs went to a rolling deadline versus target deadlines. And I think the success rates went up and the number of applications actually came down a little bit. It gives us some flexibility to request corrections for compliance issues. We don't publish that anywhere, but if something comes in, there's no deadline and you've got some mistakes, I can say like, hey, could you fix this? Where if there's a deadline, it's not fair to do that. But still get your proposal in the queue, because it also means that we are not saying here's our allocation of funds that we're going to spend. It's like, we got to see kind of what comes in through the year. And so I'm saying this about granted, but this would be true for any program that doesn't have a deadline. I think it's important to keep in mind that rules like this are about being fair. So when there's a deadline and somebody is strict about that deadline, it's because if they did it for you, they would need to do it for everyone. Or maybe it's like, okay, yeah, we're not actually reviewing this yet. You could change it, but you know to ask. What about the person who would also like to change it and they don't think to ask, or they're afraid to ask? It's not fair. So that's why there's all that rules and red tape that's usually to keep things, even for everyone. There's no budget limit for granted, so you should ask for what you need, but scope for sustainability. And I think this is good advice for all projects, really, all types of projects. You want to propose a budget that you can maintain after the award ends. So like I said before, we don't want to see that you're going to propose to hire 3 people and then fire them all when the grant ends. We want to know how you're going to keep that going. How are you going to build your research program as a new PI? What are things going to lead into? And that isn't like a review criteria for most awards, but it's going to make it more attractive. And then you want to consider that within the larger context of the program's funds availability. Often, maybe not always, but often a program will have a way to find out how much money they have. So like for us, last year we had $35 million. If you propose something that was 25 million, like that's like almost our entire budget. Is your project so good it's worth our entire budget? Having some contextual information is helpful. This is a big contrast to other programs at NSF and other sponsors. Okay, I'm going to kind of annotate our program description a little bit. This is the synopsis, and I want to highlight this phrase here. The research enterprise is broadly defined as blah, 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 blah. This is what we think the research enterprise is. And so if we are saying we want projects about the research enterprise, this is what we mean. It's right. It's in the program description. Oh, this is the next paragraph of it. I'm not highlighting anything there. Here. Projects should engage professional, administrative, research support and service workforce in project leadership roles described within proposals. That means we want the people who are doing the work to be part of the leadership teams for the projects. Focus on activities that create institution or organization-wide impact. So we don't want something that's going to be just one lab or one department. We want something that's going to move the needle at the institution. We want projects that are nationally scalable models to build and sustain the research enterprise infrastructure. So that is key. We want a model And we want that to be nationally scalable. So you can go ahead and do something at your institution, but we want to know that it's going to be meaningful outside of your institution. It's going to be a model that others can learn from or potentially implement or iterate on or so on. They should be centered around one or more of the main themes for granted. This is must, they must be. So you have to know, then in your proposal, you've got to address at least one of these things. The project budget and duration should be determined by the scope of the proposed activities. So while there's no budget limit, we're saying right here, think about the scope of what you're doing and ask for the money you need to be sustainable for the scope of the work. And not intended to fund discipline-specific STEM research and training projects. That means if you submit something that's discipline-specific, it's not going to be successful. And then it goes through these 5 things: national transformation, scalable models, new and authentic collaborations and partnerships, diversify the institutions and ideas that approach NSF, broaden participation in the nation's research enterprise. Okay, so how do you know what to write from all that? You go to the PAPPG. So this is going to tell you exactly how your proposal needs to be formatted, the length, the pagination, the fonts, what you can include, the sections, what you need to have, so it's going to say you've got to have a section that says intellectual merit. You've got to have a section that says broader impacts. You have to have a section that says results from prior NSF support. So we don't need to reiterate that in a solicitation because it's all right there in the PAPPG. Okay, so the next few slides are the slides that we typically use when we give presentations about granted and we talk about tips for successful proposals. So in the blue bubbles, I've pulled out phrases from our program description to help you tie the program description to what we say we're looking for. So we want a model that's scalable or transferable with a strong rationale. So we will say, describe the challenge that you want to address. You need to say why it's nationally relevant. Okay, from the project description, nationally scalable models to build and sustain research. Focus on activities that create institutional organization-wide impact. Consider the local or regional concern. We tell people to produce a discovery, test a model, and it should be something that others might use or benefit from, and should align with the institutional goals. And so there it's generate scalable models that mitigate these barriers and expand capacity and competitiveness. Oh, and the institution-wide, organization-wide goals. We provide advice about stakeholders. So almost all of our projects either involve some kind of partnership or collaboration, or they are producing some kind of intervention or solution to solve a problem. So maybe, our investigators have a hard time managing their project spending, and so we are creating this dashboard solution to help them with post-award management. Do the faculty want that? Do you have people who will use it? Do you have any evidence of that? So evidence of stakeholder interest or need, that it is an authentic relationship from the start. So like reviewers see straight through if you say, we're going to work with this community college, and there is like no evidence that you have interacted with that community college, that comes through in your proposal. And I would imagine it would be the same thing if you said, I'm going to go work in Alaska permafrost, and you had no evidence that you knew anything or had ever visited Alaska, like that's going to come through. So here, this is the piece about creating new and authentic partnerships and collaborations. Institutional alignment, again, this is the institutional organization-wide impact. We talk about evaluation plans for granted proposals. So having some kind of baseline data. So how will you know if it worked? You need to know what you started from and what the change is. So maybe you have an external evaluator that helps you do iterative assessments so you can course correct, or at the end know the outcomes. For a lot of research, this would be something hypothesis-based probably, or somehow testing an objective. We want to know that, not we want to know, but often reviewers respond well to something where there is a possibility that it might not work. that you are going to learn something. It's not a foregone conclusion. You actually are going to discover something in this process. And I think that's true for kind of all projects, notwithstanding the advice I gave about NIH versus others before. But, you know, it is an open question. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to do this research to test it. So you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But you want to know, you want to be able to say how you're going to know if it worked or not, if it was true or not. And then we usually give advice about having strong dissemination plans. So we want people to share what they've learned, both in the process of doing the work and also the outcome, like the intervention or model or whatever it is that they produced, and get that information to the right people. For most research, this has a little bit more of a structured convention. It's going to be going to conferences or publishing in journals. Granted, has a little bit less of that culture built in. So, you know, we want to see how you're going to do that. Oop. And then some common compliance issues, collaborations and other affiliations. These tables, they can't be blank, and you've got to have it for all your senior personnel. Your collaboration, you got to use the rules in the PAPPG using the right formats. And current and pending support, you have to list the proposal you're submitting as pending, and it has to be for all of your senior personnel. Okay, I am nearly at the end here. So poll 3, you can run that. And while you're running it, I'm going to go through the information on this slide. Wanted to bring up, everyone feels insecure sometimes. And I think we feel particularly insecure when we are putting our ideas out there to be scrutinized in peer review. It's hard. It's really hard. You should start early, because you're going to give yourself more time to fret. You're going to give yourself more time to put down crappy ideas that you will improve upon. When I start writing, it's like full of swear words and stuff. And I go through, I just need to let myself go, right? Give myself permission to see anything other than a blank page. So you really, really do need to get feedback on your early drafts. It is scary. Sometimes you don't have the psychological safety among your peers that you would like to have. And so you are shy. No, it's not ready yet. Oh, it's fine. I don't need help. Somebody's going to see your ideas. You are going to submit them to an agency that is going to send them for peer review to your external peers. These are people you may or may not know personally, but wouldn't it be nice to get some feedback from people who are going to like and respect you no matter what? And so if you don't have those within your institution, maybe you can find them externally. I mean, this is part of why you go to conferences and so on, is to make these relationships. Start early, because then you have time to go through these iterations and get this feedback. My opinion, I'm not a psychologist. Perfectionism, I think, is anxiety in disguise. And so, you know, I have seen some of the most successful researchers with some of the most money are people who are able to just let that document go. And I have reviewed some of these documents, and they are not perfect at all, but they are out, they are released, they're submitted. And I've seen some of the most brilliant people who struggle the most being the ones who just can't ever release anything. You know, they're just such perfectionists, they can't let things go, and it's really tough. And start early, so that you have time to deal with your perfectionism and your anxiety. Overwhelmed, okay, not bored, that's good. All right, oh, whoops. So here's some resources that I really like. And again, this is not NSF talking, this is me talking. I found this book, How to Write a Lot, really early in my career, and it helps you get over yourself. So it talks about specious barriers and how like all these excuses you use about why you can't get to writing. And this is it's a very slim volume. It's really great. And it gives also kind of goes through some common writing tropes and mistakes and helps you make your writing sound a little more polished. Finish your dissertation once and for all. This woman, Allison Miller, came and gave a presentation while I was in grad school that was, oh my God, it changed my life. She talks about really how to deal with this anxiety that everybody feels when they're trying to do something like write. And this is about dissertation, but it could be any writing. This could be proposal writing, writing journal articles, anything, just basically helping you manage the anxiety that will inevitably come and get in your way. The Narrative Gym is awesome. This book is like $5. It takes literally less than an hour to read. I timed myself when I read it. Super quick, and it uses this and, but, therefore framework. So you would say, we know this and we know this, but we don't know that, and so we need to. And so you will find most of the most persuasive writing, persuasive speaking, social impact campaigns, all kinds of stuff. If you pay attention, you'll see they're using this and, but, therefore, and it keeps you from doing that thing. Like little kids go, and then, and then, and then you're like, get to the point. Why does it matter? And they're 4, so, they need to learn that still, but you know that because you're an adult. So you could use this and, but, therefore framework to your writing, or at least your introductory materials. And it makes a much more impactful and stronger narrative. And then this same author has another book called Houston, We Have a Narrative, which expands this idea out a little bit more. So the Narrative Gym, if you're going to read any of these, read that one. And then I think this is just about my last slide. Exercise empathy. So in this room, we have some faculty and we have some administrators. Administrators, your faculty are feeling insecure about their ideas. They are feeling maybe insecure about their writing skills. They are afraid to get these ideas down on paper and get them out. And that is part of the reason they are pushing their deadlines. They are time crunched, teaching, doing service, doing research. They're in the lab, they're writing their proposals. They have a lot of competing things. They're confused. They don't understand the process. They don't understand all these rules and policies. And you're telling them like, no, this has to go in this category and not that category. And they're like, what? I just need to be thinking about how I'm going to make these other measurements. And they're feeling a lot of pressure, particularly if they are still working toward tenure. This is make or break for their jobs, getting these grants. But they're excited, right? They are excited about their research. This is their passion. They did all this so they could be studying soil carbon or whatever it is. Faculty in this room, think about how your administrators might feel. They are also insecure about doing certain functions. Maybe they know a ton of accounting, but they don't know about editing or something else. It's not necessarily their job. And they might be 1 or 2 people supporting all of the external research in your whole institution. They have to wear a lot of hats, and they're going to know some things better than others. They are also pressured on deadlines because they might be working on Professor X's proposal, and then you show up and you're like, mine's due tomorrow. You've got to do mine. Well, they're already doing one. Or maybe they have multiple faculty that they're supporting who are all aiming for the same deadline. That's really tough. They're often pressured to bend the rules, right? Like, oh, come on, it's okay. Just do it for me. Put it in this category instead of that category. Or faculty do something I heard somebody call answer shopping, where like, if they ask you a question and you tell them no, then you're just going to go to somebody else and try to get a different answer, right? That kind of sucks. They're often caught in competing deadlines. They feel underappreciated, right? These are professionals and they don't want to feel like they're less than. Like they're coming to work every day too. They have expertise and training and they're working hard too. And they are genuinely motivated to help you. They're usually mission-driven people. They want to be part of something bigger themselves. They love being part of research. They want to help you and they want to see you be successful. So we're done. I have the last poll. How do you feel now? I'm hoping you feel better than you did before. But I will take questions. I talked a lot longer than I thought I was going to. I am so sorry that I didn't leave enough time for questions, but I can stay a few minutes if we need.
I do have a question for you, Sarah, and thank you so much. Very, very entertaining. All kinds of comments about how much people appreciate the breadth of knowledge. So this is great. So Amit would like to know, question of track record of success for fresh new faculty members. How do you establish a track record of success when you don't have any grants?
Well, maybe you have some papers or presentations. So you can be showing that you have a track record of success in doing the research, even if it isn't your own independent funding yet. Also, there are certain funding opportunities that are targeted for junior faculty, early career faculty. I think NIH gives like extra points I think that's how they do it now. But there's like the NSF career. There are other funding opportunities that I'm blanking on because I just talked for 2 hours that are specifically for early career people. Sometimes you can do well with foundations or like local funding agencies that kind of help you get your foot in the door. Those are a little bit smaller usually, but they show that you can manage a project.
Okay. And then Dr. Ponce, I would like to know, is there a list of words you need to avoid? Climate change is one thing. What about shoreline erosion, salinity levels, seagrass disappearing? It's hard to do environmental studies without touching on those things.
For those specific things, I would talk to the program director in the program you're interested in. I haven't heard of anything that specific like salinity or erosion or so on. I've been hearing environmental justice. I think some of the executive orders specify gender, climate change, maybe. So nothing as specific as what that list was.
Okay, so now Romina would like to repeat her original question. This was about the poll where she stands. So early career investigators, she defended her PhD in 2008. She was tenured in the research council in her home country, but when she moved to the US, she had to start over. How do funding agencies consider my situation? My concern is that I might be automatically rejected if I apply under the wrong category.
Yes, you should ask first before you put the effort into making a proposal for a specific opportunity. Sometimes they are years since terminal degree. I see that a lot. So 10 years maybe since the terminal degree. Sometimes in biomedical sciences, that's not the case, or it'll be years since your first independent position. Sometimes it'll be, years since you started your faculty position. And so, it depends. So it will be specified and you can reach out and ask how strict it is. Foundations in particular sometimes have a little bit more wiggle room.
Okay, I hope that helps, Romina. Wendy would like to know, do you have any advice specifically for mid-career faculty members who haven't gotten any large grants yet?
I think I would take some of the things you've submitted and you've gotten feedback on and do 2 things. Well, do 3 things. Take all of your review comments and kind of like take each comment and put it into a document and start to group them and see, are there common themes? Is there something that is happening with every one of your proposals that it's like, oh, I am not showing my statistical design well or something. So you can do that for yourself. I think you could talk to a trusted colleague to see, is there something up with the ideas you're proposing? Is there something about them that isn't novel enough or doesn't seem feasible? Is there a problem there? And then I also think if there is someone like me that you have access to, like some kind of research development person who could help you go through the critiques you've gotten. Sometimes those outside eyes that aren't influenced by the research ideas themselves can be a little bit more objective. Another thing that is really hard to hear is that someone who reads your proposal has nothing to go on other than what you have written on the page. And so it is tempting to say, oh, they didn't get it. They didn't understand me. They had preconceived ideas. All they are working with is what you have told them. And so if they didn't get it, it's because you didn't explain it very well. And I don't know that that's the problem with you individually, who I think you said Wendy.
Wendy,
Yeah. So I'm not saying that's you, Wendy, but like, I know that that's a pitfall. I have experienced this, and I, definitely have lots of really brilliant people around me who have too. So, try to look for patterns. And then also making sure that you are applying for the right opportunities. So like if it's NIH, making sure you're going to the right study section and stuff. And I think colleagues and mentors can help with that.
Okay. Do we want to run poll 4? Do we have time? Do you want to do that?
Yes, please. Let's run it.
Oh,
So I see this one about, oh, poll 4, thank you. How can you explain the broader impact for basic science? There must be a reason that you're doing it. There must be a reason that you're interested in it. And so I think if you dig down into that, it can help you figure out what the benefit to society is. So in my case, I mean, you know, I was doing soil microbiome. So I was coming up with like this giant list of bacterial taxa that were in this like teeny little bit of soil. Like, who cares? But I could spin that up to what were they doing? What were the processes? We can't understand what they're doing until we know which ones are there. And what they're doing could impact how much carbon dioxide versus methane gets into the atmosphere. And that's really important for climate models. And this is a huge piece of uncertainty for these climate models. And so that would be a societal benefit for understanding these bacteria in this little tiny grain of soil. So I think, you know, kind of thinking that way.
David, do we have any other questions?
I am so excited. Sorry, I just saw the poll results. More confident and excited. Yay!
Excellent.
and you should be. No, Sarah read that last one, about broader impact, and I think that was the
Yeah.
last one in the chat, so I think we're good.
Excellent.
Thank you all for being so attentive. I know this was a really long presentation. I didn't intend for that, so
It was
fantastic.
wonderful.
And
It was
nothing but-
wonderful.
Nothing but good comments, I have to say. So yeah,
Good.
it was very, very well done.
good. Thank you.
Candid, relatable, on point, reinforced our Wednesday workshop on many things. Just absolutely wonderful talk. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed preparing it and giving it. So
And now, did Sandy meet you at a conference? Is that how you got her?
me.
Actually, I am an applicant to Granted, so I'm very familiar with all the wonderful program officers in this program. We benefit greatly from Granted.
We love you too.
Anything else we need to announce to our participants before we sign off? The Wednesday recorded session is posted in Canvas. A Monday message will be coming out early next week. This presentation will also be posted as soon as we submit it for Jason to get ready to go up. So I anticipate it going up next Monday or Tuesday. Dr. O'Brien, if you have the opportunity to share your slides, if you would, I know people would be very interested in being able to go back and just refer to those. So
Yeah, I don't expect that to be a problem, but
okay,
I'll double check.
great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope you come back next year.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Have a great
Right.
weekend, everyone.
Have a good weekend, everybody.